Hey everybody, welcome back to the shop. This is Todd with Industrial Comfort. For all you surfcasters out there, today I'm going to show you how to make this fishing lure coat rack. Let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do for the project is cut channels on the back of this board for these hanging coat hooks that I bought on Amazon. So what I'm using here is a standard piece of 2x6. And if I stand this up here, I'm not sure you can see the lines I've drawn, but essentially I've determined that the best location for these hooks is about 8 inches apart from one another. Now, obviously this is going to be personal preference, but this is kind of the look that I'm going for. So what I'm going to do is use a Forstner bit to start the project by marking 2 inches up on each of these lines that are 8 inches apart. Now the reason I'm doing that with the Forstner bit is to create a little pocket for this piece of the coat hanger to sit in the wood here, so that when we put the board flush against the wall, it'll actually sit flush. Now I'm going to end up using a saw or an angle grinder or cutoff wheel to end up removing this back piece here. So again, it'll sit flush. And then I'm going to use my router once I've cut or drilled the holes right here using a 1-inch Forstner bit. I'm going to use a rabbit bit to cut a small channel essentially up until the hole here that I'm going to drill, so that this will nest into the wood from behind. So again, everything will sit flush against the wall. So I'm going to go ahead and take the board over to the drill press. And again, I don't know if you can see this in the video, but 2 inches up on each of these lines that are spaced 8 inches apart. This is a standard 2x6, which measures 1.5 inches thick by 5.5 inches wide. We're going to drill a shallow 1-inch hole with the Forstner bit and then use a router to create the channels here. As mentioned, I'm using a 1-inch Forstner bit to drill these shallow holes. The bit that you may need might differ depending on the type of hooks that you end up buying for this project. I apologize for such a terrible camera angle here, but I'm using a 1/4-inch rabbit bit to create the channel for the shaft of these coat hooks. You just want to go deep enough so that the shaft itself sits flush with the top of the board. In this step, I'm going to be cutting off the back portion of the door hanging coat rack. Now, I had to use this style of coat rack because they were the only ones long enough that would work for this project. So I'm using an angle grinder and a standard cutoff wheel. I'm now using a drill bit to drill a hole at the top of these hangers so that I can screw them in from the back side. With the hardware prepped, it's time to rough out the shape of the lure. And I'm not sure if you can see on the board, but I've kind of sketched out the general shape that I'm looking for and brought over to the bandsaw to make the cuts. I accidentally forgot to turn the camera on to show where I cut the end of the lure at an angle. And what I'm doing now is just using a washer to mark out how I'd like to round over the corners here. After contouring the corners, I bring over to the router to smooth out the edges using a 1/4 inch roundover bit. One of the other things that I didn't film, and I apologize about this, is contouring the nose of the lure. So I used the belt sander to create more of a concave appearance to the head of the lure. Before spray painting the lure, I want to get a nice base coat on with some brush paint. At this point, I'm not thrilled about the contour and shape of the lure, so I took my belt sander and I'm going to add a little bit more contour to the head of the lure to give it more of that lifelike appearance. In my box of screws, I found a nice big screw eye that I'm going to use for the front of the lure. I'm using a corresponding drill bit for the size of the screw eye I have so that I can screw it into the lure when we're all done. Obviously, the size of the screw eye is going to be personal preference. It's time to paint the lure. Now, if you've seen any of my previous videos, you know I hate painting because I'm so bad at it. So this is, again, going to be personal preference, but I'm going to use a white background and ultimately a red fade for the look of this lure. Now, before I finish painting this lure coat rack, what I'm going to do is install 2 of these, what are called keyhole hangers. And essentially what they allow you to do is mount your, whether your coat rack, your picture frame, your mirror, what have you, flush to the wall. And the head of the screw, in this case, will slide up into this slot. And for the most part, it actually allows you to get this pretty flush to the wall. What I'm actually going to end up doing is taking a 5/8 inch Forstner bit and cutting a very small channel where I want the keyhole hanger to be, which will allow us to sit this completely flush with the wall. So we'll bring it over to the drill press. We'll cut the channels for this. I think what I'm going to end up doing is measuring up about 4 inches to the top of the keyhole hanger. And what I'll do is just make a mark here where I'm going to put the channel. And then I'm going to do the same thing. And again, I'm just spacing this out so that I'm getting a decent coverage area side to side while also putting it as high as I can, or reasonably so, so that it's well balanced. I'm just going to trace this like this, and then we'll bring it over to the drill press. Alright, so I've got a coat of white paint on the coat rack. Now what I'm going to do is add a two-tone appearance using some red with a fade. Now, if you don't want to do a fade, you can just add a piece of painter's tape here, cover with newspaper, to get a very similar appearance. Now, I've seen fishing lures use both techniques. My wife would prefer a fade. Now, the only thing I don't like about a fade is that if you mess up, you have to redo the whole thing all over again. So the important aspect here is that when you're doing the fade, angle the paint toward the front of the lure. That way you're not going to get overspray coming toward the back half. We want to avoid that. So what I'm going to do is start by flipping this over to coat kind of the edges here. Then I'm going to flip back over and hit it from this direction to get that fade that we're looking for. With the paint fade now completed, it's time to figure out what to do with the eye. And I've decided to use a washer that I had laying around that I think is going to be a perfect fit for this coat rack. And what I'm actually going to do is take a Forstner bit, which is the same diameter as this washer at 1 3/8, and I'm going to drill down the same thickness as the washer here at about 1/16 of an inch. That will allow me to nest the washer against this this lure. And then what I'll do is fill the center with some black hole to give it more of a lifelike appearance for the eye. And then we'll give it a final clear coat finish before assembling everything. So before gluing the washer in, as I mentioned, I'm just going to put some black paint in the background so that when we place it in, it will have a nice black appearance. Okay, off camera, I just, I don't know if you can see it or not, I scuffed up the backside a little bit. I'm going to apply a little bit of epoxy here. And I'm just going to drop in place. With the color and the paint now complete, it's time to assemble. So, first thing I'm going to do is put the eye screw in. I've pre-drilled, as I did in an earlier step, and I'm just going to screw this in. Okay, for the next and final step, we're going to screw in these hooks on the back side of this lure. So there's an important step I need you guys to pay attention to. So as you can see, there is a taper to this hook. So you'll notice that this piece ends up going down like this. So what I've done is go into my toolbox, and I have found a couple of washers that I'm going to stack like this. Now these are 2 washers. They look to be about 1/16 of an inch thick, and that's going to allow this to lay flat with this portion of the hook. Now, had I thought about this beforehand, I would have drilled out the hole for this piece of the hook a lot shallower than where I routed for the rod here. So with that being said, I'm going to put these in place, I'm going to pre-drill them, and then screw them in. And we are done. For all you fishermen out there, Don't forget to keep those lines tight. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks for watching.